In the opening scene, we get to see young Amy as she's dropped off by her father at the restaurant. Mama, the main chef of the restaurant and the owner, would always be the one to take care of Amy. We see them having lots of fun while preparing food for family dinners Fridays. A beautiful table served with a lot of Italian dishes lays in front of Mama as she passionately talks about the importance of that day. It was a tradition her nonna started in Napoli, so to honor her legacy, Mama continues the tradition. Picking up their glasses, they cheer in Nonne's name, but young Amy seems to be lost in the dish's beauty. So we see her admiring a dish once again, but this time she is an adult. Staring at the beautiful primavera, Amy can't help but admire the craft. She gets snapped back to reality after a waiter, who is also her best friend, asks whether she can take the pasta to a customer. Before Christine gets a chance to take the pasta away, Amy starts talking about how she was as beautiful and bold as the primavera once and even asks Christine what had happened to her. Christine assures her that she's still all of that but that she's just stuck at the moment. Amy complains about not being promoted and claims to quit if she doesn't get promoted at the end of her shift. Finally, the workers are called by the owner who lets them know who the permanent manager will be. Unfortunately, it is a worker from another location of the restaurant and not Amy. At Mama's, different things seem to be happening. The head chef Frank prepares his famous tiramisu for one critic, but he is too proud of the dish that he serves it himself. However, he is surprised to hear her call his masterpiece dry. Shocked, he claims that it must be impossible, but she assures him that it is as she's tried it herself. Despite her getting up to leave, he tries to convince her that she's wrong. Of course, he expects the worst once the review goes online. Amy asks for an explanation why she didn't get the position, but the owner tells her that there's a chance next year. However, Amy had promised herself that if she didn't get promoted, she would quit. Walking out of work with Christine, Amy feels free but also admits to feeling scared. Their conversation is interrupted by a phone call and Amy finds out some horrible news. The lawyer on the phone asks her to come by his office because Ms. Tucci passed away. Later in the evening, Frank sits by his computer waiting for the results of the food critique. Finally, the review is posted, and although she calls his menu original, she claims that he isn't quite there yet. Frustrated, Frank wonders why she said that his dishes need more love. His colleague tries to calm him down and truthfully admits that Frank can come off as brash sometimes. As they're arguing, Frank's phone rings. Unfortunately, it's the same lawyer who calls Frank to give him the horrible news about Ms. Tucci. The next morning, Amy goes to her favorite cafe and orders a cappuccino and the last cannoli. While enjoying her coffee, she overhears Frank's ordering the same thing as her. Luckily, he sits down at a table opposite of hers, so Amy takes the chance to comment on their orders. Frank takes her small talk as a way of flirting, so he makes sure to introduce himself as Chef Frank. Amy opens up the newspaper and Frank is surprised to see himself on one of the pages. Not wanting to embarrass himself, he tries to distract her from the newspaper by asking whether she's willing to split her cannoli with him. There is no sense for them to split it since she ate half, so he asks her for the newspaper. Seeing that it's already time to go, she gives him the newspaper and the leftover cannoli before leaving. In the lawyer's office, they wait for one more person to come before they start with the will. Finally, that person comes and Amy is surprised to see Frank there. He reveals that he is the head chef at Mama's, and Amy lets him know that she and Mama were close. Sitting down, the lawyer informs them that Mama had left the restaurant to Amy, and her wish is for Frank to stay head chef at the restaurant. So we see them the next morning, Amy waiting for Frank to open her new restaurant. Walking in, she's taken back to the days she used to work as a waiter, and when Mama promoted her to the manager of the restaurant. However, she snaps back to reality and sees that the inside is completely changed. Amy sits down to look at the situation of the restaurant and she finds out that it's not doing so well. Luckily, she is an expert in that field, so she assures Frank that she'll make the restaurant thrive. Handing Frank the new book of rules, Amy catches a glimpse of a gaming machine in the corner. Disappointed, she realizes that the place needs a total renovation to bring Mama's back. She even confides in Christine, but she assures her that she won't fail Mama. The next morning comes and the staff is ready to adapt to new rules. Before Amy comes, we can see Frank and his coworker in the kitchen. Frank admits to being stressed about the shift and Mama's death, but it is fascinating to him how he saw Amy right before the will. He admits to flirting with her but thinks that she hadn't even noticed it. They have a group meeting where Amy asks them to say something about themselves. Frank kicks things off by introducing himself as the head chef, claiming that the menu is only his duty. Sal is next and he reveals that he has worked at Mama's for a couple of years, hosting, serving, and cooking. Lorenzo is next and he almost reveals that the restaurant had almost fallen apart. With an optimistic mindset, Amy lets them know that they will be renovating the restaurant to look like it did, to honor Mama. She sits late in the night, looking through old photos and Mama's old recipe book. Coming across a ragu recipe, she finds out that it had been her husband's favorite. Papa had always claimed that the secret of the recipe is to always go easy on the seasoning and heavy on the confidence. And so we're taken back before Mama and Papa open the restaurant. A young Ms. Tucci is preparing ragu and she asks Papa to try it. Everything is perfectly delicious, but Papa claims that he can't have anything anymore because he's full. Ms. Tucci is worried about the First Generation Food Festival. It is a great Kickstarter for launching careers and Mama wants to get in. Roberto assures Mama that Faith will guide her and that she has nothing to worry about. They sit down for dinner and while Roberto's pouring red wine, he asks her what she sees, implying to the future. She sees the Manhattan skyline, the view from her quaint brick building, and her restaurant Mama's. Looking deeply into her eyes, Roberto grabs her hand and promises that he will give her that view one day. Frank passes by and snaps Amy back to reality. She calls after him to let him know about the sacrifices Roberto made for the restaurant. In the book, each recipe has a memory with photos and stories. Amy thinks that restoring everything to the way it was would bring back success, but Frank doesn't agree. Assuring him that she isn't there to change the way the restaurant is, she reminds him that everything that she's doing is for Mama. She asks him to trust her and he suggests that it should be both ways. Deciding to give him a chance, she agrees to a taste test of Frank's dishes. After work, Amy meets with Christine and complains about how challenging her work is. It is not only Frank that's bothering her, but she is also worried about her falling out with Mama. She wonders why Ms. Tucci would leave her the restaurant, as many questions swarmed her head. The next morning, Amy sees the restaurant already in progress. Everything has been cleaned out and all of the workers are working on repairing the old things. She approaches Frank with a quest for him to help her recreate old Mama's recipes. He doesn't understand why bringing the old recipes is important for her, but she asks him why he's so opposed to bringing the classics back. Coming up with an idea, Frank asks Amy to meet him in 2 hours, so she can try his version of the menu. Looking at the strange dishes in front of her, she asks what they are. The dish in front of her consists of roast branzino with tomatoes, potatoes, and olives. However, she goes for a dish next to it, which is supposed to be a better version of Mama's pen. Grabbing the glass of water immediately, she claims that the dish is too spicy, but Frank thinks that she's not adventurous enough. She asks him how he ended up at Mama's. Amy hopes to get an interesting answer, but Frank deflects the question. Not letting it slide, Amy asks him not to deflect the question, but he claims that he isn't as there is no story to tell. Sal brings the tiramisu shortly, but Amy doesn't want to try it. It is clear to Frank that Amy is opposed to his menu because she's a picky eater. He assumes that she's part of the people who only eat chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, but she claims that everyone likes to eat those things. Amy doesn't try the tiramisu but promises that she will one day. She takes him to one of Mama's favorite restaurants where she orders Mama's Flight, a platter of Mama's favorite wines for Frank to try. The next one is Chianti. They used to drink this wine when they would have long talks about life and love. Maroni is a bold wine, so that's why Mama associated it with the rush of taking risks in life. Pushing the third glass closer to him, she asks whether it seems familiar. With a change in his tone, he says that it's Mama and Papa's favorite wine. Speaking of wines, Amy asks why they aren't carrying any of Mama's favorite wines, so Frank lets her know that they had to cut back because of finances. Amy claims that losing the stables might lead to people forgetting about Ms. Tucci. Frank agrees, so Amy reveals that she wants to go back to the old recipes to celebrate Mama. Their next stop is where Mama and Papa used to leave. They walk there, and once they get in front of the building, Amy reveals that's the place where Mama dreamed of making her mark on the culinary world, and then accomplished so much history there. She opens the book to 1972, revealing that the restaurant had opened exactly 50 years ago. There wouldn't be a better way for them to honor her legacy than by reopening the restaurant on the anniversary for one day. However, Frank realizes that they only have 2 weeks until the anniversary, so it would be impossible for them to open in time. Amy suggests they expedite the schedule so the reopening coincides with the anniversary. She knows that it'll be a lot of work but is positive that they can do it. Frank thinks that it's too ambitious, but Amy assures him that Mama will guide them. As they're talking, Frank's phone rings, so he goes to answer it on the side. A feeling of guilt takes over Frank as Mr. Wallace from Regios tells him that he has an opening for him. However, he doesn't decline and asks for more information. Sal is the first person to find out that Frank had gotten an interview for another restaurant. Frank reveals that he's not concerned about the reopening of Mama's since he's gotten a new job offer. If everything goes right, Frank reveals that he'll leave Mama's. Sal gets upset, but Frank shushes him as Amy walks to the bar. Amy lets everyone know that they'll be reopening the restaurant in 2 weeks, but assures them that she will bring more people to help. However, a snarky comment can be heard from Frank, which surprises Amy. Not wanting there to be any arguments, they compromise on having both Frank's and Mama's dishes on the menu. Amy hands the book of recipes for Frank to look through. So the preparations start. Amy brings some old photos that used to be in the old Mama's while Frank masters the dishes. In the meantime, Amy looks for new employees. She asks for people to have the same qualities Mama wanted her employees to have. Someone enthusiastic, hardworking, responsible, punctual, tenacious, someone who's excited to come to work, and someone who wants to be a part of the family. Knowing how qualified and hardworking her friend is, Amy asks Christine whether she wants to work some extra hours, and luckily for her, Christine agrees. After a long day of interviews, Amy finds the kitchen in a mess. Walking in further, she finds a tired and frustrated Frank. He admits to being rusty on Mama's old recipes, so Amy decides to invite him to her place where she'll be cooking a meal. He comes into her apartment with a bottle of red wine and is surprised to see all of the ingredients in front of her. She promises to make him spaghetti di Maria, but her cooking skills are not so good. However, Frank thinks that she doesn't need any help from him. Just as he says that, Amy drops the spaghetti on the ground, so he steps in to help her. After playing around with different ingredients, they sit down to enjoy the delicious dish. Amy finds it hard not to think about Mama while making her recipes, and Frank agrees. The last time he spoke to her was a couple of months before her death. Amy is about to share the unfortunate story as to why she and Mama stopped talking, but they get interrupted by her phone ringing. Answering the phone, she hears the workers at the restaurant panicking over the phone. The oven had stopped working, but the opening is in 2 days. Frank and Amy go back to the restaurant only to be met with a bigger mess. Letting the people who know how to fix it deal with it, Amy goes to the office to read more from Mama's recipe book. She comes across a page that says gnocchi and ragu sauce with a photo of Mama and Roberto smiling. The recipe was used at the festival, and Mama claims that it fits together just like she and Papa. Mama talks about the man that had approached them at their food stand and how he offered to help with the opening of the restaurant. Unfortunately, they couldn't afford it, but the man had been kind enough to offer Roberto an office job. Papa's hard work inspired Mama to come up with a recipe called Good Fortune. Returning to reality, Amy checks on how the oven's going. The worker tells her that the oven needs a new spark module, but it would be impossible for them to find that kind of spark module since the oven is from the 60s. No matter what they say, Amy doesn't lose hope and suggests they look for a new one. Even Frank promises to help her. Sal gets to Frank and asks him what kind of man he has become. Frank claims that he's just being a team player, but Sal thinks that he has a crush on Amy. The next morning, Frank sits on the rooftop reading the story of Mama's wedding soup. Mama claims that her soup is best served with a little spontaneity, as we see how Roberto had surprised her with soup on the rooftop. Looking at the view in front of them, Roberto had suggested they keep the rooftop to themselves as a secret place for them to get away. They kept the tradition strong for many years, as we see them on the rooftop for their 35th wedding anniversary. The story puts a smile on Frank's. Amy comes through the door, but Frank notices that she's rather sad. She apologizes for not listening to him and admits that the memories with Mama sometimes hit her. To ease her mind, Frank suggests doing something before they get the spark module. Frank takes Amy to Little Italy, where he wants them to celebrate the wedding anniversary by visiting Mama and Papa's favorite spots. Their first stop is at Mama and Papa's favorite gelato place. Amy is suspicious of the excursion, as she assumes that it's not just about them celebrating the anniversary, but Frank reveals that it's a good chance for him to meet his new friend as well. He asks Amy what it was like growing up with Mama, and Amy admits that Mama helped her dad in raising her after she lost her mother. Amy saw her as her surrogate mother since she was always there for her, especially after her father retired and moved to Florida. Mama and Papa have both taught Amy not to settle for second best. Curious, Frank asks when she and Mama last spoke, but just like him, she tries deflecting the question. He insists, so she reveals the truth. The last time she spoke to Mama was 1 year after leaving the restaurant. She wanted to do a good gesture, knowing that Mama's business had been slow, but unfortunately, she was misunderstood. Going up on the rooftop, Amy shows Mama what she had done. Tables from the restaurant sit there along with some decorations. Mama's face drops, and she tells Amy that the rooftop had never been for business because it was just a special place for her and Papa. Before Mama leaves, she asks Amy to take everything off the roof before she goes. Amy admits that their relationship hadn't been the same since that happened, but she knows that she'll always be her little tesoro. Recognizing the word, Frank lets Amy know that Mama had spoken about her all the time before she passed, how she missed and loved her tesoro. Their next stop is Mama and Papa's favorite hot dog spot, but it seems like it isn't there anymore. They continue walking when Amy asks him what kind of impact Mama had on him. Frank admits that Mama had saved him from himself in a way because he used to be hard-headed. Amy squeals excitedly as she sees a knick-knack that says friends on it. Frank asks her where she's going to put it, and Amy reveals that she'll find a place for them as it resonates with their friendship. They sit on the bench reading about the recipe for a good marriage. Coincidentally, it is the same spot where Mama and Papa had their first conversation as a married couple. We see a young Mama in a wedding dress and Papa in a suit. He notices that she's nervous about the future, but she claims that it's good nervousness. To make her feel better, he takes a rock and pretends that it's a worry. Holding the worry for a bit, he throws the rock into the water, letting go of the fear. Back to the present, Amy reads that you need 1 part trust, 1 part communication, and many parts wine and pasta. Noticing that she's still upset, Papa suggests they use Papa's rock method, which surprisingly works. After a long day of exploring, Amy and Frank return to the restaurant with a new spark module. Before Frank leaves to grab more stuff for the opening, Amy bluntly asks him whether he wanted to ask her out when they first met in the coffee shop and whether that was the reason he was acting weird. Overwhelmed, he doesn't know how to respond, so Amy takes the chance to let him know that she would have said yes. The anniversary day finally comes and the oven luckily works. The staff gets to work as they start the preparations for the day. Amy takes the time to read another one of Mama's stories. It is about Papa's cappuccino and his extra splash of espresso and how they bonded over it the first time they met. Mama was sitting at the bar when Roberto served her a cup of cappuccino. He apologizes for not being able to talk to her since the cafe had been busy, but she suggested helping him, and that's how it all began. Amy tells the story to Christine, but Christine implies that it's the same way she and Frank met. Amy lets Christine know that nothing is happening between them, but as she's telling her what they did the previous date, she realizes that Frank had pulled a reverse date on her. A customer walks in and claims that he had to come earlier so he could try the tiramisu, claiming that he doesn't care about the reviews. Confused, Amy asks him what reviews, and that is how Amy finds out about the review in the papers. Christine asks what she's going to do, and Amy reveals that she will have to put only Mama's staples on the menu. Before officially opening, Amy gathers everyone to let them know about the changes and wishes them luck. After that, she runs to Frank and personally hands him the new menu, reminding him that if he has any questions he should come to her. However, Frank doesn't even read the menu and doesn't have the meals ready when Sal asks him for them. An argument breaks out as Frank runs to Amy, who is in the middle of the restaurant, to ask her why she changed the menu. She lets him know that she didn't want to do it, but the article had made it hard for her. He claims that he would have told her at the right time, but Amy claims that she can't work with someone who doesn't reciprocate trust, honesty, and communication. The next morning, we see Sal and Frank talking about the job interview he has to take in the afternoon. Frank thinks that it's best for him as he doesn't feel like he belongs at Mama's, but Sal knows that it's because of Amy. The next story Amy reads is about her favorite pasta primavera. It is her favorite pasta, but it reminds her of a time when she quit working for the restaurant. While Mama was making primavera, Amy approached her with the news that she had gotten a job offer. Despite it being as hard as losing Papa, Mama encourages her to take the job as it is about time she spreads her wings. Tears fall on Amy's face as she finishes the story. However, she comes across one last recipe called tiramisu di Franco, and Mama claims that it is the best reminder of the importance of moving forward. We get to see Frank's interview with Mama as well. She asks him why he had left his previous job, and Frank admits to being too proud and wanting to cook a certain way. He notices that Mama isn't saying anything, so he lets himself out. However, Mama stops him and asks what motivates him to cook. Frank admits that food is his safe place, and as he continues to passionately talk about the importance of food to him, we can see Mama recognizing the potential in him. She had hired him then, and with time he had shown her that he deserved it. His constant work had made him eligible enough in Mama's eyes to trust him with making a new menu, especially his tiramisu. Taking a bite of the famous tiramisu, Amy realizes that she's making a mistake. Mama would have loved it if the menu was filled with Frank's recipes, so Amy decides to have another chance. She calls a meeting for some prep work, but Frank is nowhere to be seen. Sal knows that he's at an interview, so he lies about Frank being at the market. Despite Frank not being there, Amy reveals that she has decided to incorporate his dishes on the menu. Realizing that he's in trouble, Sal lets Christine know that Frank is at an interview. Amy gets ready to go out, but before she does, she asks Sal where Frank is. Panically, he lies that he is at a market in Manhattan since they have the best tomatoes. Luckily, he calls Frank and lets him know that Amy will be there, so he can meet her. At the market, she finally sees him and apologizes for overshadowing his work. His recipes were included in Mama's book, so she knows that he was one part of the team, and doesn't want to underestimate him. Frank accepts her apology as she reveals that she wants to move forward with his menu. Looking through the recipe book, Amy comes across a letter that has her name on it. The letter was inspired by her talk with Frank. She had revealed to him that she was feeling guilty about the falling out with Amy. However, Frank reminded her that true friendship can withstand anything and advised her to write Amy a letter. In the letter, Mama assures Amy that no matter what, and no matter where, she will always love her and be there for her. Amy reads the letter as tears fall down her eyes. She sees Frank walking by, so she runs to show him the letter. However, Mr. Wallace interrupts their moment. He asks Frank to give him a clear answer and even promises to sweeten the deal because he wants him to be the head chef. Reopening day finally comes and we can see Amy greeting the guests in good spirits. Everyone is more than happy and excited as the restaurant fills with people. Sal talks to Frank in the kitchen and advises him to talk to Amy before it's too late. However, Christine tells Amy that she's proud of her for finally letting him go. Frank and Amy bump into each other in the kitchen, and while Frank starts the conversation about leaving, she stops him and assures him that she's not mad, but rather happy for him. Kimberly, the food critic, is their surprise guest for the night, and they find her a seat just in time before Amy gives her speech. She raises her glass of Moscato and dedicates her speech to Mama and Papa. It is their dedication and love that kept the place going and made it successful. The reopening goes great. The customers are satisfied with the amazing food and wine. Amy asks for Frank, but she doesn't know that he's preparing her something special. While looking for the cookbook, Christine lets her know that there's a letter for her. She is touched by Frank's poem about her, so she heads to the rooftop to meet him there. Like Mama and Papa used to do, he waits for her with wine and treats. Putting some music on, Frank takes Amy's hand for a dance. He admits to wanting to take her out on a date at the coffee shop, and about the reverse date. One thing he didn't expect is that she would help him. By keeping Mama's memory alive, she helped him find his passion. He doesn't know how to thank her, so she suggests they become co-owners of the restaurant. However, he reveals that he had already turned down the job because he already had the best thing. He kisses her unexpectedly but with passion. Amy suggests they pick up where she left off in the cookbook, and Frank couldn't agree more. Just like Mama and Papa, they dance on the rooftop as the stars shine.